It's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. For The World This Week, in partnership with the Daily Beast, foreign editor Christopher Dickey is with us. How are you, sir?
Glad to be back in Paris.
Yeah, you were in New York last
Yeah, I was in New York last time.
Welcome back to Paris. Georg Blum, France correspondent for the German news weekly Die Zeit. How are you, sir?
Thank you, very well.
Thanks for being with us. She hails from sister station Radio France International's Russia service, Elena Gabrielan. How are you?
Hello, Francine. Thank you very much. Thanks.
We have in our midst photojournalist Tom Haley. His new book, Journeyman, hits the stands when? September the 21st, right? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
The World This Week on Facebook and on Twitter, the hashtag World This Week. 400,000 refugees in the space of a fortnight. An estimated 1/3 of Burma's Rohingya Muslims have been forced to flee to neighbouring Bangladesh. Our correspondent saw plumes of smoke from across the border earlier in 5 different places. What the UN Secretary General bluntly calls ethnic cleansing. Christopher Dickey, what's your reaction to this? What has to be for sure the biggest case of ethnic cleansing the planet has seen in a long time.
Yeah, in a long time, and it's horrendous. It's incredibly ugly. But I think you also have to look at how complicated this situation is. The Rohingya have been oppressed for many, many, many years. This is not a new phenomenon. What's new is some kind of sort of very shadowy insurgency began back in October, and it grew much worse in August. And the military of Burma, because it's the military that controls this area, it's not Aung San Suu Kyi, they have taken actions that are extreme. Basically, they have decided we're going to put an end to the Rohingya problem by pushing them all out to Bangladesh. This is horrific. It is, I think, without question, ethnic cleansing, but there's not a solution in sight because the military is very powerful in Burma still. Suu Kyi is not in a position to stop them. She's reluctant even to criticize them. And nobody's offering any solution to this problem.
Yeah, reluctant to criticize him. A year ago, when she did attend the UN General Assembly for the first time since becoming Burma's de facto leader, Aung San Suu Kyi promised to work towards finding a solution for the Rohingyas. She won't be at UN Week. She said she won't go. Instead, she'll be speaking on national television next Tuesday. So far, she's expressed no explicit compassion for the plight of the Rohingyas, and all of the compassion she has expressed is secondhand. Cue the floor of the U.S. Senate on Thursday, where the majority leader said he'd spoken on the telephone with the Nobel Peace Laureate.
But as I stated earlier this week, in my view, publicly condemning Aung San Suu Kyi, the best hope for democratic reform in Burma, is simply not constructive. Yesterday, I had a chance to speak with Suu Kyi on the phone. I would emphasize that she's the same person she was before. Her position in the Burmese government is an exceedingly difficult one. She is state counselor. But by law, her civilian government has virtually no authority over the Burmese military. According to the Burmese constitution, the army is essentially autonomous and it has control on the ground of the Rohingya situation. Unfounded criticism of Suu Kyi exaggerates her ability to command the military.
All right, those were the words of the Senate Majority Leader. Elena Gabrielan, could Aung San Suu Kyi be doing more?
I'm afraid that she's in a difficult situation, not only in her own country, but also on an international scale, because we see that the international community is divided. If we have a new resolution in the United States, we're not sure to have the approval of all members of Council of Security. We remember that Russia and China blocked a few times the resolution, and also from a Russian point of view, when Americans supported democratic elections, they tried to cut Myanmar from China, to decrease the influence of China. So that's why Moscow is supporting China in this situation. And I'm afraid that on even international international level, it would be quite difficult to find a solution. I'm quite pessimistic.
Georg Blumen, you agree?
Well, I think the West should be much more active in this regard. Now, they have a Muslim community who's evidently victim of what you call ethnic cleansing. It's a big chance for the West to say, hey, we are not double-headed, or we have not two judgments on two different cases, and we support by other means than words this fleeing community. And I think
So how, for instance?
well, you can send more. First, you can go there. You can go to Bangladesh. It's an open country, and support those who are in this country. Politicians can go there and witness the situation, not just journalists. And I think there are many opportunities to work with Bangladesh in that case, which we leave this government alone, and it's taking the refugees there. And it's very important that we don't. We've had the refugee crisis in Europe. We know what this is, what people are suffering in even we didn't have an army involved. I think we have to try to be at the same level of attention when this happens so far away from us, and with people which we really don't know, the Muslim minority in Burma. I mean, who cared about them? We were all fans of the monks of Burma when we were revolting against the government. Now the monks are the nationalists who are saying, go out to these people and go away to these people. So this is for the world conflict between the West and the Muslim communities. This is a very big issue.
Tom Haley?
Well, I mean, it's a terrible humanitarian tragedy, and the powerlessness seems to be insurmountable. I'm interested in what Georg was referring to also is the idea that this is a Buddhist country, majority Buddhist country, and we haven't seen Buddhists being in an oppressive, authoritarian way for a long time. And I think it's an interesting, as opposed to some of the other configurations around the world of one religion oppressing another.
Tom Haley, you've covered ethnic cleansing in places
Yes.
like the former Yugoslavia, and also mass exoduses. We can show this picture. This is not from Bangladesh. This is from Eastern Congo, and you took this picture in 1996. This movement of people. What's it like? What must be going on right now?
Here, you mean?
When you think back to what's in this photo.
Well, this was a forced exodus that when they decided to empty the camps where mainly Hutu refugees from Rwanda had gathered, and from where they were doing operations into Ramwe,
back into Rwanda.
Yes, and so there was a decision to empty these refugee camps, which were actually serving as havens for these groups. And it was a massive exodus that occurred.
When you think back to a photo like this one, and you hear what Georg was saying about the slowness of the international community to get into action, what are your thoughts on that score? What can be done?
Well, we seem to be discovering the limits of international action all over the world these days, and it's very frustrating. I don't know what the answer is.
I think that the first thing to do, if we can find a solution on the international level, military, political, first thing to do it is to send a humanitarian help to the Bangladesh, for example, because now at the same time that the Western countries are criticizing Myanmar's government, we hear also Turkish government criticizing Chechnya's leader Ramzan Kadyrov, who are persecuting also, for example, gay community in Chechnya. So they are not very good
But he's
place
defending
to
the
have
Rohingya.
Yes, exactly. And so, and even they organized a very big protests in Chechnya, and some people were witnessing that they were forced to go to participate in this protests. And finally, which is really very strange, that Vladimir Putin, he said that it was his own opinion of Ramzan Kadyrov, and we also saw on social media circulating some information who the people were appealing to make a jihad and to go to support.
So this
Muslim
crisis
community.
putting Kadyrov at odds with Putin?
I think actually it is a very interior problem. Ramzan Kadyrov wanted to show that his voice could be listened in Russia, but a lot of Russian experts are talking about keeping a distance with this conflict, and Russia shouldn't interfere in this conflict, but we know that Russia supports very good relations with Myanmar community. They are selling aviations to Myanmar, and in May 2017, the head of army visited Moscow. So,
Well, I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind, because we'll be hearing a lot about it in the future, is, as Georg suggested, this plays into the war of civilizations, or the clash of civilizations, if you will. Okay, it's Buddhists versus Muslims, but the whole driving force of the so-called Islamic State and of Al-Qaeda has always been, we, the jihadists, we're fighting a defensive war, that Muslims are under attack all over the world. This that we see with the Rohingya is an absolute crystallization, a perfect example of it.
We've seen Islamists in places like Indonesia.
Absolutely. Always. This is the image, whether it's true or not. In this case, it is true. And in fact, it may be that Al-Qaeda or ISIS or other groups like them, jihadist groups, have been part of the insurgency that helped to push this in the first place. That's the kind of game they play. It doesn't justify what's being done, but that's the kind of game they play. And Ramzan Kadyrov, in a very weird move, has this 500,000 people turn out, or 1 million people, depending on who you talk to, in Grozny, to cheer for some kind of move to protect the Rohingya. Why? Because Kadyrov wants to present himself, as some people there said, as the alternative to, guess who? Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, as a leader of religious Muslims around the world. It sounds crazy, but we live in crazy times.
I think it's a very big chance to show solidarity with the Muslim community. Are we grabbing it or not?
No, it's the short answer.
Chris Radicki, we're going to go down memory lane with a magazine cover from a...
Why do you look at me for memory?
Because it's a publication that you know well. Have you heard of this publication? It's called Newsweek.
Yes.
This is a picture taken by Tom Haley, who's sitting right here. And this is from a different era when strongman Ferdinand Marcos ran the Philippines. Now, the Philippines' current president began the week by announcing Marcos' birthday would be a holiday in his home province of Llocos Norte. Then Duterte got the approval from the House of Representatives to lower the budget for the commission probing human rights abuses in his war on drugs from $12 million to, well, the equivalent of just under $20. $20, that's right. And now his defense chief warns of martial law if next week's anti-government protests by leftists turn violent. Tom Healy, your thoughts on the Philippines today and the Philippines of 1983, 84?
Well, it's incredible because Duterte is one of these strong men like Ferdinand Marcos. I mean, this demonstration that is supposed to be on the 21st is the anniversary of when Marcos declared martial law in 1972. And at the time, the martial law was welcomed by the business class, and it's after a few years it deteriorated into corruption. And what Duterte is doing, this killing, assassinating so-called drug pushers, is very similar to what was happening in the 80s when Marcos was fighting against a grassroots movement. He like Duterte today is calling them terrorists. He would call them terrorists. They were Marxists, but basically wanted the United States to get out of the country, and they were nationalists. And anyway, but what they called then was salvaging, which was extrajudicial killings of whoever they thought was a,
Yeah, and times have changed on that score. You visited Mindanao, where Islamist militants have been...
Davao City, where Duterte is the mayor.
There's a young man we could show here. And oh my God, it's you, Tom. Oh, look at that.
with Commander James Bond. It was his name.
And so then it was leftists, and now it's Islamists.
Well, but Mindanao was, as much of the Philippine archipelago southern part was Muslim. And the Muslim, in the 70s, there had been a full-out war with the Philippine military and the Muslim community in Marawi, which was the center of that. The Muslim indigenous people objected to the sending by Marcos, this colonization of Mindanao by basically Christian settlers from the northern islands. And this was really what set off the tensions, in the 70s.
But they had leftist rhetoric in those days.
Well, the MNLF, which was a Islamic movement, and the NPA, which was the leftist Marxist, the New People's Army, were two separate things.
Yeah. The extrajudicial killings, by the way, are triggering a blowback. The Catholic Church ringing bells this Thursday to say that they don't agree with them. Your thoughts on what's going on in the Philippines?
Well, I think the Catholic Church often had a positive role in liberation movements in Asia. If we look to Korea in the 1780s, the Catholic Church was probably the most strongest institution to support students and others who are fighting for democracy. It has been part of the Catholic Church has been part of those who put Aquino to power in '86 and made democracy come to the Philippines. But on the other hand, the Catholic Church in the Philippines is very much part of the establishment. The Duterte people are always saying they're only taking the money of the rich and giving very little on to the poor. And with such kind of thinking, Duterte has won the elections. And there is a lot of credibility in Duterte because democracy has failed largely in redistributing wealth in the Philippines. We are saying that 40 big families in the Philippines owe 3/4 of the wealth of the country, and that was absolutely the same before democracy came to the Philippines as it is today. So, as some people put it, the opposition today is not democracy anymore. Opposition is also not what have been all the left-wing groups there, but is populism via men like Duterte, and which seems the most credible in getting something else done.
All right, we have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You're watching The World This Week.
Reporters, presented by Mark Owen.
In Jerusalem, 30% of the population is ultra-Orthodox. They're known as the Haredim, men who fear God. They recognize only one authority, that of the Creator.
Ils n'écoutent que le rabbin. Pour eux, le rabbin, c'est le médecin, c'est le juge, c'est le premier ministre, c'est la loi.
In Jerusalem, as in many other cities in Israel, the ultra-Orthodox have their own neighborhoods, their own shops and schools. But they regularly come into conflict with the authorities. Our reporters went to Jerusalem to investigate these men in black defying the Israeli state.
Reporters on France 24 and France24.com. Revisited, presented by Stuart Norval.
Straddling the border between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, the Aral Sea has a surface area of 66,000 kilometers squared, twice the size of Belgium. In 1950, the Soviet Union diverted 2 rivers which fed the sea to irrigate their fields for large-scale cotton production. In 50 years, the Aral Sea lost 90% of its waters, leaving behind swathes of desert and ruining thousands of livelihoods. It seemed it was lost forever. But things have improved over 10 years thanks to a new dam. The water's rising gradually, with it the hopes of the inhabitants.
Revisited on France 24 and francevincat.com.
Welcome back. Before we resume the world this week, a sample of the stories that we're following for you in the newsroom. A manhunt in London after a homemade device goes off on the underground during morning rush hour. 22 injured from the blast and the ensuing stampede. The French and Russian presidents agree only direct talks can resolve the standoff with North Korea. Emmanuel Macron and Vladimir Putin speaking on the telephone, both condemning Pyongyang's latest firing of a ballistic missile over Japan and into the Pacific. A French photojournalist to be released and expelled after more than 6 weeks in a Turkish prison. Lou Bureau was detained over photographs and interviews with Kurdish militia fighters found in his possession. The Parliament of Iraqi Kurdistan votes whether to maintain a September 25th independence referendum, this amid pressure not to from the likes of Turkey and the United States. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. Christopher Dickey, foreign editor, is with us. How are you, sir?
Very good, thanks.
Welcome back as well to Georg Blume, France correspondent for German news weekly magazine Die Zeit. We're also in the company of Elena Gabrielan of the Russian language service of sister station Radio France International, and photojournalist Tom Haley. His new book, Journeyman, out in French? Is that it?
In French, yeah.
Soon in English?
Inshallah.
Okay. We were wondering in the newsroom, and perhaps you can answer this, Christopher, what's gotten into Donald Trump? Last week...
Don't we ask ourselves that every morning?
It was a surprise deal with the Democrats where to avoid a budget impasse. Now it's news that on Wednesday he had a little private tete-a-tete with the House and Senate minority leaders without the Republicans, and that Trump is ready to do a deal on dreamers, illegal immigrants who arrived in the United States before the age of 16. Let's look at just one of his tweets from Thursday. Does anybody really want to throw out good, educated, and accomplished young people who have jobs, some serving in the military? Really? Exclamation point, Christopher.
But this is not radically different from what he's been saying for a while, which is that he sympathizes with the dreamers. He doesn't necessarily want to throw them out, but his base... Really, I think we should quit talking about his base and call it the cult that have elected him, these true believers who were swayed initially by his talk of the wall and keeping out Muslims and basically sealing up the United States. They're appalled at this. And I think it just shows what a cynic he is. He thinks that, in fact, it's a good idea to keep these young people, 800,000 of them, working and going to school in the United States and being productive members of American society when they've committed no crimes and no offense against American law except to be brought in by their parents. And his base hates this idea. So he's trying to balance this out. He talks to the Democrats and he says, we can work out something to keep these kids here. And then he talks to his base and says, boy, we're going to have the toughest damn wall you ever saw. He's going to go back to the wall. The problem is that the Democrats, when they came out of that meeting, said, we didn't talk about the wall. And for Trump, that's politically unacceptable.
Yeah, it's politically unacceptable, you say. Let me read you a comment from an Iowa Republican Congressman, Steve King. He says, quote, Trump base is blown up, destroyed, irreparable, and disillusioned beyond repair. Beyond repair?
Yeah, that's politics. Listen, you should see the kinds of things that Trump has said over the last year, even in recent weeks and months, about Schumer and Pelosi, the people with whom he made this deal. And now he's talking about Schumer as if they're just great friends, and Schumer is saying the same thing. Politicians are complete cynics, and he is as cynical as they come. And King is as cynical as they come.
And Schumer, that you mentioned, the Senate minority leader, yeah, he seems suddenly downright congenial when it comes to his fellow New Yorker who currently occupies the White House.
He likes us. He likes me anyway. Look, what we said was exactly accurate. Here's what I told him. I said, Mr. President, you're much better off if you can sometimes step right and sometimes step left. If you have to step just in one direction, you're boxed. He gets that. Oh, it's going to work out, and it'll make us more productive, too.
You gotta love it when they leave the microphone on, Elena.
It's absolutely unbelievable for me that it is going on in the United States. Well, with Trump, we're not surprised about anything. His previous tweet, it is something that reminds me words of Barack Obama. That's why I find it is quite cynical. And I have impression that we are completely in impasse and we can find some consensus inside Republicans, and especially in the moment where Trump is under pressure on the international questions like North Korea, Syria, and even with Russians. So if we didn't find the solutions in the United States in very crucial topics like immigration, which was a part of his election campaign, I even can't imagine how we can go forward on other topics.
Is it chaos or organized chaos? That's what I guess the rest of the world is wondering about what's going on in Washington.
Well, listen, I'm not much of a political analyst. I just saw the interview that Charlie Rose did with Steve Bannon. And it's the first time I think that Bannon has given an interview. And it's frightening because Bannon comes off as being, he's very convincing. You know?
Did he convert you there, Tom?
Well, no. But I could see where he could convert people who didn't have firm ideas. And he talks. In fact, I think he didn't really leave with ill blood the Trump team. He's gone out because he's more effective at the head of Breitbart, as opposed to being in the White House and kind of shackled to what, you know.
Well, especially with General Kelly, the chief of staff, who didn't want him there. That was absolutely clear.
But does Bannon represent a fringe, or is Tom right that he could convince more and more people?
I think there's been a problem all along. The people, particularly people on the left, and even a lot of people in the center, who are appalled by a lot of what they see with Trump, don't listen to some of the core messages. The reason he has that cult following is that people thought that he was telling them and speaking in a voice and saying things that nobody else had been saying, but that they firmly believed. That's one of the reasons that it is so risky for him to move toward the center, which is what he's doing now, because they're like another politician who lied to us. And Bannon is out there. He says he's defending Trump. But what he's really doing is, in his terms, trying to keep Trump honest. And that's going to create a lot of problems.
Listen, he talked very forcefully about working on this grassroots, populist, right-wing, nebulous cult, as you would say, for 2020, you know. And, I mean, I hope they don't get past 2018. But the thing is, what disturbs me more is that the Democratic Party cannot get their act together, and part of that is the leadership, I believe. Sure. Hillary Clinton has just come out with this autobiography where she sort of denies the...
Right, and I, like many people, wish she would go back for a long walk in the woods and never return. But Hillary Clinton is not going to be the new leader or resume the leadership of the Democratic Party. Obviously, it's looking for new leadership. I think they're not going to be in great shape in 2018. But I think that over the long run, before 2020, they'll be able to find somebody who can run against Trump effectively, because he will have had to deliver or failed to deliver on so many things. And remember, when it comes to legislation, so far, he's failed to deliver again and again and again, working with his own Republican House and Senate. That's one of the reasons he's turned to the Democrats. If he moves so far to the center that he and the Democrats start governing together, well, God bless. Maybe we're out of the woods. But we'll see how that goes. Right now, it all looks like a cynical ploy.
Speaking of being out of the woods, they're just war games, says the Kremlin. Russia accusing the West of, quote, whipping up hysteria over military exercises that stretch from eastern Russia to Belarus, Kaliningrad, and the Baltic Sea. Critics, though, Elena, they say that the code name for the drill is a bit of a giveaway. Zapad. What does that mean?
It means west in Russian. Zapad, it means west, and every 4 years Russia organizes such kind of exercises. This year, 12,700 participating officially, and number really matters.
Because NATO says it's 100,000.
Yes, but it was the same that in 2013, officially it was 22,000, and finally estimated number was nearly 70,000. But which is really important to notice that below 13,000 troops, the organizers must invite the international observers. Above 13,000, yes. And we have 12,700. So
Convenient numbers, what you're saying.
Yes, but anyway, Belarus decided finally to invite some observers because they are also a little bit afraid about their sovereignty. And also Ukraine is really concerned about this exercise because finally the question is not what will happen during this exercise, even if we can have, for example, the violation of airspace of NATO countries, intentionally or otherwise. The question is what will happen after.
Yeah, because we had the cases of 2008 where there were war games that turned into the invasion of Georgia, and same thing in Crimea where
exactly. And if finally
games,
Russia decides to leave her troops in Belarus, because now we have two assets in Belarus, and Putin has plans to create a military base in this country, and Lukashenko, Belarusian president, is really very concerned about these plans. But the question is if Belarus is really have this independence from Moscow to claim, for example, that Belarus will not less use his territory to attack Ukraine using Russian troops.
The German chancellor, she's been wanting to mend relations with Moscow for so long. What happens if that scenario occurs?
But did you notice from what we heard about Macron and Putin talking today? You know, they talked on a lot of issues. They talked a word about the exercises, not as we know from the Élysée Palace.
Not in the official communique.
So the dialogue is going on as Merkel would, keep on talking to Putin, and I think that's a very good thing. But because fundamentally, I think what these pictures you just showed us show is that Russia is the strongest military power in Europe. It's our neighbor, but we have to accept that. And we are often, thinking, well, we have our sanctions in place, they're a poor country, we'll get them to our knees. It's not so easy. And they are showing us that they are the biggest military power in Europe.
Yes, but at the same time, we show that there is a big mistrust, because we don't have a transparency in terms of participants, in terms of assets, in terms of equipment.
Yeah, and as you said,
it all shows that they're capable of playing with us that way, without us really. And very fundamentally speaking, as a German, we have attacked Russia 2 times in the last century. The French did with Napoleon. We lost all militarily in Russia. That's still the military history for them, that they are showing us what they're up to. You have to accept that. And,
what they're showing us...
luckily, Merkel and Macron are keeping up the dialogue.
What they've shown us they're up to is trying to recreate the Russian Empire. That's what they're up to. I mean, it's really not a secret that that's what Putin wants to do. Already, I mean, it isn't with Putin. It dates back to his predecessors. There is a unity agreement with Belarus. That's one of the problems that we're looking at right now. Where are they going to put that military base? Where are they going to build a new reactor, for instance? They're moving up onto the Lithuanian border. Mm-hmm. The Baltics are terrified, and with reason. The Poles have every reason to be concerned about this too, as well as Ukraine. This is a strategically located country, Belarus, that's only semi-independent to begin with, so it wouldn't be at all surprising if Putin leaves a hell of a lot of troops there. And yes, you can say that in the last exercises in 2013, they had 22,000 or however many. They had the same problem with numbers, but that was before the Ukraine. That was before Crimea.
I share your concerns. The most rational reaction on the North Korean crisis, I think, came from Putin, who told us keep calm. The only one who spoke clearly about sanctions won't work. I think the most dangerous message we had from Donald Trump in the last week, or maybe 10 days ago, was when he said, we're going to really make sanctions work with North Korea. If he does that, he is going against China. And we all rely on China to keep the border open. Because when you close that border, you really put the North Koreans to your knees, and then they become dangerous. And only Putin was capable of saying that.
Well, this is the same Putin who absolutely goes nuts every time there's a deployment of anti-missile systems that he thinks will compromise his ability to attack the United States in mutual deterrence. So now the United States is faced with someone who's directly threatening it with nuclear weapons, developing ICBMs that are able to reach American territory already and will soon be able to reach the continental United States. And Putin says, oh, calm down. It's all okay, even in the face of explicit threats. I'm not warmongering here, and I agree with you. There aren't many good solutions. But for Putin to preach to the United States about them, well, I can't say how exactly I feel about that.
And by the way, this Vladimir Putin that we're talking about, he's going to be, attending those war exercises come Monday.
America has to get used to being in this
being as irrelevant to international affairs
to
as
being
Germany?
as we are all the Japanese and the Koreans and the Chinese are all the can be touched by missiles of other countries. The Americans will have to learn that they are in danger too.
Frankly, I hope that we are irrelevant as long as Trump is in the White House.
All right. 9 days to go till the Germans vote in a general election. So the question is, why is this woman, we're about to show you her picture, why is she laughing? Well, Angela Merkel, probably seen the poll numbers, and also surrounded by auto executives. This was at the opening of the Frankfurt Motor Show. She's been accused, by the way, of being a little too chummy with those responsible for the Dieselgate emission scandal. So in her speech, she did wag the finger at abuses. She also, though, as well, spread the blame beyond Germany's borders.
I would also like to say that it's not just German manufacturers who are responsible for maintaining and improving air quality. More than 3 million foreign-made diesel cars are driving on Germany's roads, which is 50% of all diesel cars in Germany. That's why I believe it's necessary that foreign car manufacturers make their contribution to solving the problem.
How do you interpret those remarks, Georg?
Well, we're really afraid because Renault has taken over as the biggest manufacturer of the world of automobiles. I mean, we are really afraid our industry has a problem, and I think Merkel has also said that during her campaign, and that a lot of jobs are in danger in the long term.
Because there are German cities that want to ban diesel cars altogether.
Absolutely.
She's not agreeing with that, and instead is she pointing the finger at other countries instead, saying they're the problem?
Well, it's the first time I hear that, and of course you have read your papers here. I mean, Peugeot seems to have a diesel problem, and Renault also has a little diesel problem, and so we can point fingers at each other again. I think, but there's a fundamental fear that we are losing our, leadership in the automobile industry, and I think Renault is a good example that it's already done in a way. Renault is the biggest manufacturer right now, and that gives the company a tremendous prestige, which Volkswagen has been fighting for many years when they overtook finally Toyota, and
but we're getting
all this is very difficult to accept for Germans.
It's difficult to accept for Germans, but the Germans, I mean, who would have thought that this would be a major campaign issue, the switch in renewables for cars. Why is it such a big deal in this campaign?
Because it seems like the only point where Merkel is attackable right now. She has been in government, she should have known too, and in fact, then again, it shows Merkel's strength, because there's nobody who would point at her and saying you have been, collaborating secretly with these people in the automobile industry. I mean, so
Elena Gabriel.
The topic, in fact, is not as strong against Merkel as it seems to be. You know.
And I think that it is a very particular German style, because we also heard very often that we don't know where ends German government and where starts cars industries, because you have a lot of, for example, Sigmar Gabriel, who was in a supervisor board in Volkswagen, if I'm not mistaken. So all these links of governments with the car industry, it is something which is also explaining why we have these issues during this campaign.
Yes, but the link is not established between Merkel and the industry, and that is also why it's a vain topic.
Is it a vain topic, Tom Haley, to talk about whether or not you ban diesel cars and whether or not you make that switch to renewable energy for vehicles sooner than later?
Well, for someone who has an old diesel, that I mean, it certainly is vain as compared to the Rohingya or what's happening in the Philippines. But a couple of weeks ago, I had to leave Paris before the 5 a.m. deadline. My wife and I felt like, because we would not be able to use our car after that 5 a.m. deadline, we felt like...
Because there's driving restrictions on polluting cars in Paris.
Because of driving restrictions, yeah. So, yeah.
Christopher Dickey?
Well, first of all, I'm tempted to say that the Germans will just have to get used to the idea that they're a second-rate automotive power. but in addition to that, I mean, this whole thing with diesel technology, clean diesel technology, you know, it never really took off in the United States, or it took a long, long time for it to even get started, while the Europeans, the French, the Germans, the Italians, everybody was preaching it as the solution to cleaner emissions. And it turns out that that was based on a fraud. So I think that sort of the chickens, as they say, are coming home to roost for the entire automotive industry on the question of clean diesel technology. And of course, the overreaction is to say we have to ban all diesel cars. That's great if you ride bicycles, but I don't think that many people are going to be riding bicycles, or certainly not enough to replace cars as the main means of transportation. What is interesting is that is talk of having 100% electric cars, in some cases by 2020, in some cases by 2040.
By 2030. Well, we'll continue to monitor that, as well as the build-up to those German elections. I want to thank you, Christopher Dickey. I want to thank Elena Gabrielon. I want to thank as well Tom Haley, Georg Blum. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
Emma, we begin with London,
yes,
where there was this attack during morning rush hour on the tube. 22 injured, no fatalities.
Yes, absolutely, in Parsons Green in the west of London. And there's certainly been a lot of the sort of keep calm and carry on British attitude in evidence. This tweet really summing it up. Seriously, you think you can beat them? That's actually from a Frenchman who understands clearly that the British stiff upper lip is alive and well. And of course, that image is taken from the Second World War, a woman having her cup of tea on the rubble of what presumably was her home. A lot of people have been commenting on the fact that there is so much coverage of these kind of terror attacks, and let's face it, this wasn't the most successful one by their standards. This person saying it's amplifying the work and the impact of incompetent terrorists. Another Twitter user saying that there is too much media coverage, they will feel that they have won. However, far greater controversy stirred up by our resident Twitter troublemaker, Donald J. Trump, who can't help but get involved the minute that it's a suspected terror attack, especially if it's perpetrated by somebody who isn't white. We are making assumptions, of course, because we believe that this may have been an ISIS, at least backed or inspired kind of attack. We don't yet know. But of course, he hasn't waited for any answers, jumping straight in, saying another attack in London by a loser terrorist. These are sick and demented people who were in the sights of Scotland Yard.
Yeah,
must be proactive.
That forced the British Prime Minister to react.
Absolutely. In no uncertain terms, Theresa May, who's not known for being that well, strong in the words that she uses. She's accused of being very robotic. But she was very unequivocal here. She said that it is never helpful for anyone to speculate on what is an ongoing investigation. She didn't go as far as naming Donald Trump, but the question was all about him. Absolutely. Yeah. And that word unhelpful has been used over and over again, including by Nick Timothy, who used to be Theresa May's chief of staff. He said, true or not, and I'm sure he doesn't know, this is so unhelpful. Now, interestingly, for those who haven't mastered the art of the British understatement, Janine Gibson, who's the editor-in-chief of the UK version of BuzzFeed, has said this, that additional detail, unhelpful is British for incredibly stupid. Now, Donald Trump didn't end there, though. He went on with a volley of tweets in which he talked about, he called for the internet to be cut off, and then also in the same tweet that it should be used better. I'm not quite sure what he's after with that one. And it was also a bit of a rallying cry for his travel ban. And he went on to say that we must be proactive and nasty in dealing with ISIS. Of course, a lot of people very quick to point out just how different his response has been when you compare it with the Charlottesville attack, where his response to that took days to come. He then recanted on it, but he, as this headline reminds us, actually talked about the fact that he was waiting for the facts. That's why he hadn't responded. British journalist Kevin Maguire, who's definitely in the left of the political spectrum, said that his slow, muddled response to Charlottesville and his fast, inaccurate reaction in London, they're both wrong, both appalling.
All right. The other story you're following for us is, better to burn out than to fade away, as Neil Young would say.
Absolutely. Going out in a blaze of glory, very literally. The Cassini spacecraft has now burnt up in the atmosphere of the planet Saturn, the planet that it's studied for the last 2 decades. And the eulogies have been really rather lovely for this. NASA tweeting a lot about it, saying, it showed us the beauty of Saturn, it revealed the best in us, now it's time, and now it's up to us to keep exploring. Now, it's actually launched back in 1997 when Bill Clinton was president. Even he's joined in with the eulogies, saying that farewell, 20 years since you launched and you've brought us a universe of understanding. Apparently, it's the thing that's given us the most evidence that there could be life out there. Chris Hadfield, probably the world's most famous astronaut, says simply, see ya, Saturn.
All right, many thanks for that, Emma James. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.